Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week our guest is New York Times contributor and author of a terrific book on where the Republican Party lost its mind, Robert Draper. Remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. Now, we'll get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. And please check out the links to our sponsors, Henson Shaving, Blinkist, and Miracle Brand in the show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors. It helps make this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. James, America voted on Tuesday, and while there's still some important votes out, we can say it was certainly a better night than Democrats expected. The Republicans' wave that they talked about crashed. Now, there was some bad news for Democrats. They lost the House almost certainly, and the Republicans have probably a 10 or 12 seat margin, nothing like the 30 or 40 seat gain they expected. The battleground states of Ohio and Florida, I think we can say, no longer look like battleground states. But there was a lot more good news. The Democratic sweep in Michigan and Pennsylvania, those were really big. All the hype that Republicans had about a close New York gubernatorial race, it didn't happen. Kathy Hochul won decisively. But I'll tell you something else. Pro-choice was a woman's right to choose was a huge winner yesterday. California and Vermont expectedly passed a pro-choice referendum. The big contest was in Michigan, where it passed easily. But maybe just as important, anti-abortion referendums lost in Montana and Kentucky. And I think finally I would say that Trump had a bad night. His handpicked candidates in Pennsylvania and Arizona and New Hampshire went down. He certainly, as did his gubernatorial candidates in Michigan and Wisconsin. And I think it does show once again, if you have lousy candidates, nothing's going to help him. But he certainly didn't help him. And what's going to drive him crazy, which is always fun to watch, is all the attention Ron DeSantis has gotten. He's already threatened to dig up dirt on DeSantis and his wife if he runs, channeling Ted Cruz. And, finally, I think it's likely the Democrats will control the Senate. They have 49 seats now. Georgia probably is going to a runoff with Warnock starting with a little bit of an advantage from Tuesday. And Nevada, the Republicans are ahead, but you're hearing that may not only close, but Democrats actually could win that race.
John Ralston says that. So John Ralston, as I say, when John Ralston tells me it's East, I dye my eggs. I don't need anything more. I'm waiting on text from Mastos' campaign manager. Hopefully I'll get one during the show. Wisconsin is probably not going to work, but it's not definitive.
You mean
still
the Senate
stuff out?
Race?
Yes, the Senate race. The governor's race is done.
Pretty up
I think that while you say this is a 50-50 election, the enormity of this is staggering. By any historical reference point or standard, it should have been a wipeout. And the reason it wasn't a wipeout was, frankly, Trump. All right, that's what got me. This turnout, I can't wait for the catalyst analysis and Ron Brownstein to come on the show and talk about the turnout, who showed up. But it's clear we had a higher younger turnout than anybody thought we'd have, and probably had a higher female turnout than anybody thought we'd have. And I mean, that's to be dissected. But by any standard, this thing should have been a blowout, and it was not. It was not.
Without question, I think I'm not sure you've had a first-term midterm election, a president's first term of the party in power that went any better. I think you probably have to go back to Jack Kennedy in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So
I think Bush had an okay 2002.
Pardon me? Bush had an okay.
Bush had.
Yeah.
Bad.
I still think anyway. But look, there were disappointments. I mentioned Ohio earlier. Tim Ryan ran a great race, gave, I'm told, just a beautiful concession speech, but it just was impossible. And my biggest disappointment, as you know, was North Carolina, where Sherry Beasley was a good candidate, would have been a great senator, and lost to kind of a second-rate gun store owner and right-wing congressman. But McConnell and the Club for Growth poured tons of money into North Carolina. I have a personal reason. My son worked for me. He told me this morning he's never been prouder. So that was a disappointment. The other disappointment down the road, and I'm going to get to the good stuff in a minute, state Supreme Court races. Not enough attention was paid to them, and Democrats lost control in North Carolina and lost in Ohio, both of which will affect voting rights and gerrymandering in the future. I wish Democrats had paid more attention to that. Having talked about the down moments, there were so many more good moments. You look at some of the candidates that won. What's her name? Lauren Boebert was defeated, James. I know that's going to upset you because you had so many great stories about how she met her husband. But she was defeated out there in a heavily Republican district. The only person in the country who thought that was going to happen was Juliana Goldberg of Bloomberg. She was out in Aspen City is going to win. That was a big deal. Ohio, the Democrats won 3 House seats in Ohio, all of which were either toss-ups or leaning R, and the same thing in Pennsylvania. So the Democratic base did quite well yesterday. And frankly, looking ahead, and there's so many uncertainties, looking ahead, I'd feel better about the night if I were a Democrat than if I were a Republican.
Oh, God, yes. I think that, from my view, the candidate of the cycle, and we'll give it to Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. I mean, he actually got involved, made sure that Mastriano won the Republican primary, much to the chagrin of a lot of people. Oh no! And then he took the crime stuff, he ran right with it. He took the inflation stuff, he ran right with it, and he won by enough that he got Fetterman across the finish line. I think he was instrumental in Fetterman's winning that Senate seat. The candidate on the Republican side that people are forgetting about because they're obsessed with DeSantis, I'll tell you another Republican politician that had a big night, Brian Kemp. And there are a lot of mainstream Republicans that don't like DeSantis, all right, and that love Brian Kemp. That's a name you're going to be hearing a lot more coming into 2024.
Yeah, probably more of a hope than a reality. I think listen, going to your point, there were a number of contests where in the primaries, Democrats in one way or another helped the least elected
Western
Republican. It not only was Pennsylvania where they did it in New Hampshire, they did it in Maryland, they did it in that congressional race out in Western Michigan. Every one of those races, the Democrats won. And I don't think it would have been a certainty. I think it probably would have been unlikely in 3 of those 4. So
it worked.
Yeah,
okay,
it absolutely worked.
It worked, and for all of the chagrin that they were trying to do everything they could to win the election, and you never know if these things are going to work, but it worked. And all of the angst and the hand wringing and oh my God and democracy, I was delighted and relieved that it worked.
Well, I tell you who else had a good night. Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney endorsed Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan. She won. Endorsed Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. She won. Said, don't vote for that ticket in Arizona. It appears, not certain in the governor's race yet, but it appears they may all have lost. So that'll drive Trump almost as crazy as Ron DeSanctimonious.
Well, it's still some chance that she's going to be Speaker of the House. I'll maintain that.
We'll get into that in the politics of the Republican Party with Robert Draper because there is a lot to get into. I'll tell you another guy who was going to be a star of sorts who emerged last night is Wes Moore in Maryland. He had a lousy opponent. It was an easy win in a blue state, but he is a very attractive guy, and I think you're going to hear a lot from Wes Moore.
He was so far ahead he could have Biden come in the state for him.
Well, look. I'm very happy for the White House last night.
I am too.
They have to do it. It's a humiliation and all. But
it was all Trump.
I mean, Joe Biden spent the last couple of days, and other than I guess he was in Pennsylvania, but in Maryland and New Mexico and California, he wasn't a factor, which was good for Democrats.
Yeah, Trump was the big factor in all of this, and he lost. I mean, it was staggering that the Democrats did as well as they did, just breathtaking. And I think the high turnout is now a feature. We talk about democracy being in trouble, and I understand that, and it is. But if the health of democracy is measured by the number of people voting, shit, we're rolling.
Let me tell you, because you may not understand, because Donald Trump explained the reason those candidates lost that he had endorsed, because they pulled back from the big lie. If they had continued with the big lie, Donald Trump told us this morning, they all would have won. Absolutely, sure. And if I had wings, I could fly. He's going to get meaner. He's going to get nastier. And what worries Republicans, however, in a Republican primary, he's still a factor. He was able to pick those guys, and he won a couple. He won North Carolina, and he won Ohio. And, I think he's a real problem for the party. But I'll tell you this much. I don't think you're going to find House Republicans standing up to Donald Trump.
Well, it's an issue. He's going to be indicted, all right? Everyone knows that. No one wants to say it. Let me repeat. He's going to be indicted. And you're going to understand the indictment. It's going to be very clean and very clear. Maybe indicted twice, for all I know. But it's a matter of time and not a very long time before he's indicted.
Well, I agree. He's going to be indicted. However, I'm not sure what kind of an impact that's going to have. I'm not sure it won't be a Netanyahu-type impact. Certainly, you couldn't be clearer than the January 6th committee. That was probably the best congressional hearing I have ever seen. It was absolutely clear-cut. And unfortunately, it hasn't made much of a difference in the country. And two of the members of that committee lost this year in elections. So I'm not sure that the indictment, as much as it should, is going to hurt Trump. One would hope.
Elaine Luria got a bad redistricting draw. If she would have had the same district she ran in originally, she would have probably won.
It'd have been very.
And I don't say that it didn't affect. The Democrats performed 7 points better than they should have. I mean, we should have been slaughtered. Something had an effect somewhere. Where you have 8% inflation, a 40% presidential approval, a 75 wrong track, and you basically tie an election. Something affected something out there. I mean, as we get more analysis, it'll get deeper. But they had a bad night. This is like East Carolina tying Ohio State.
Well, they did have a bad night, and all those factors you cited were in play. The other thing was in play, in a lot of places, Democrats had better candidates, and Republicans had bad candidates. It wasn't just the high visibility Senate races we talked about, but it was House races in the western part of Michigan, where the Democrats won. In Ohio, the Republican legislature had absolutely gerrymandered Marcy Kaptur out of a seat. They turned a seat that had, a 7, 8 point Democratic advantage into one that had at least an 8 or 10 point Republican advantage. But she was a veteran, and she happened to have the good fortune to run against a nutbag. And
they're a liar too.
Right, absolute liar. So I think candidates, sometimes people say candidates don't matter. It's all about the environment. It's all about conditions. Well, sure, the conditions make a big difference, but boy, candidates do too. And the Republican Party put up some really bad records.
Yeah, I go back to Josh Shapiro. He's my poster boy for how to run a mean, tough campaign.
Well, I hope you're right about Wisconsin.
I don't know.
I think
I don't know. All I'm saying is that there's still votes coming in. Generally, the late vote is heavily Democratic. I don't know. He's still pretty far behind.
I will say this. I think this should teach the left a lesson. I doubt it will, because I think either of the other two major Democratic candidates would have beaten Ron Johnson, who had he was off the charts in negatives in the state. Papers were saying he was an embarrassment, which he is. And I think there's an Oregon House race too, where the left defeated an incumbent Democrat that may turn the district over to a Republican. So you would hope they would learn something. I rather doubt they will.
People just can't stand them, and they keep saying, and they pretty much shell back into a few places in the country. They do enormous damage to the party brand. We have, messaging was not that great. I mean, the reason that we did so well is because people just were repulsed by Trump and Dobbs and rioting and everything else. But I think that the Democratic Party, I hope people can sit down with the left and figure a way to how they can fit into our coalition without doing so much damage.
Yeah, I do too. I would say a final note. Last night was the first time that I had not covered or directed coverage of a midterm election. So I watched it all night with a group of friends, and they had on a set with four different networks. And I know what my dream of an election night coverage would be. I want to have 3 sets on, and I want to have Judy Woodruff, my wife, because who anchors that news hour with such distinction. And then I want to have Steve Kornacki on, but I don't want to hear any of the other MSNBC types. And then we go to CNN, I want to hear David Axelrod's insights and not the rest of the panel. Man, I'll tell you, that's where I learned last night from Axelrod and Woodruff, which was expected. Kornacki is the best thing since Tim Russert.
It's great. And he's a horse degenerate. That's what I like about him.
Well, I think that's fine, but I think his politics
are
more relevant.
If let me tell you, I've tried picking racehorses. It's hard, trust me. But he went to Astor. He goes to all the big horse races.
Well, what he did last night that was so smart, he went to each county or each district or each state, wherever it was, and he compared the votes that the Democrat and Republican candidates were getting versus what Trump and Biden got there. Because that's what mattered, whether you were, with early voting and you don't know what's coming in late. But you do have a sense when you compare to how it was 2 years ago. He made a great contribution.
The one observation you make that I agree with, I do and did a lot of cable TV in my life, is everybody's political opinion is not equal. All right, Kornacki knows more about, he has more data in front of him. He's got more everything. 80% of the other people yapping, that's just, they don't know this. They might know cultural things. They might know this, that. And, the same thing with CNN. I mean, David's opinion, or Paul Begalo's opinion, and me are much more learned than most of the other people on there because that's what they did with their lives. And I think your point is well taken, but they do these panels and they got to have every kind of balance that you can have. The one balance they don't worry about is anybody knows what the shit they're talking about.
Yeah, and that's you're right about Kornacki, and he was so good. And then they go back to the MSNBC panel, was all a bunch of Democrats, liberal Democrats, talking about how bad the Republicans were. I don't need to be told what I think on election night. I want to be told what's happening.
Yeah.
And so
I already know. Yeah, I already know what I think.
I couldn't wait for Kornacki to get back on.
Right. I watched it on my computer. It was
anyway, a big, a good night. I will just say in closing that I think that the biggest loss next year is going to be Nancy Pelosi, who's going to leave the House. She will leave the House, I think, as perhaps the greatest speaker in the history of the Congress. And she went out with the same distinction and that she's always enjoyed, and she will be missed.
Well, you have no idea because there's nothing that enhances your reputation than the person that comes after you being about the worst speaker in history, and that's almost guaranteed. If Kevin McCarthy is the speaker,
yeah,
I'm not totally convinced that
you're going to get into that, James, with Robert Draper. I think you're right. And when you're trying to look and feel on top of your game, nothing is better than a perfect shave. And when you're making an impression in front of the camera or in the office, you can't go with the nicks and skin rash that come with a cheap razor. You need the best razor, not some annoying subscription or flimsy plastic. That's why you have to meet Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that has made parts for the International Space Station and Mars rover. And now they're bringing you precision engineering to your shaving experience. Think of razor blades like diving boards. The longer the board, the more wobble. The more wobble, the more nicks, cuts, and scrapes. A bad shave isn't a blade problem, it's an extension problem. And you need ultimate precision. It's an aerospace-grade CNC machines. Henson makes metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches. That was less than the thickness of a human hair. That means a secure and stable blade with a vibration-free shave. We've been around for a long time, and we've never had better. Now, that's not all. Henson Shaving's razor has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream, which makes clogging virtually impossible. It's the ultimate design and constructed to last. Seriously, Henson Shaving wants the best razor, not the best razor business. That means no plastic, no subscriptions, no proprietary blades, and no planned obsolescence. Plus, they're affordable. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edge blades to give you that old-school shave with the benefits of new-school tech. And once you own a Henson razor, it's only about $3 to $5 a year to replace the blades. We found that we get a few more rogue hairs than we used to, and Henson Design can handle it all. My first shave with it made me feel 20 years younger. I need that. And the design and durability is unmatched. It handles everything in its path with ease. We're never going to go back to anything less. Now, that's a pretty darn great shave, James.
Well, I mean, look, the idea, this is brilliant, that a space company, and you know these people have to have the best engineers and the finest tests and the finest metals and everything. And the fact that they branching out and using that kind of technology to make a razor, this is a stunning product. Stunning product. Because all that other stuff is all that plastic crap, weighs nothing. They're exactly right. And I hate those plastic handles, even the ones from some of the other more prominent shave countries. If you don't have something solid, it's no good.
Yeah. Well, it's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/warroom to pick the razor for you and use code WARROOM, and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just make sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/warroom and use the code WARROOM. You also can find the link in our show notes.
They got 100 free blades?
100.
Well, you know what it cost me when I go to like Walgreens or CVS and get 5 of these? But it costs you $25.
You got to give 2 new speeches.
Jesus, man, yeah.
Hey, James, this Republican Party about to assume control of the House is not your grandmother's political party. This is captured in a brilliantly reported new book by Robert Draper, Weapons of Mass Delusion When the Republican Party Lost Its Mind. Robert, you began reporting this book on January 6th. Trump's was in disgrace then. It was to be a contest, as you put it, between the reality-based wing versus the lost-its-mind Republicans. The mindless faction won, and Trump hasn't gone away.
Yeah, that's right. And Al, the thought would have been at that moment, among most reasonable minds, would be that the Republican Party would recoil in horror from what had taken place on January the 6th, taken stock of its responsibility for it, and endeavored to purge those corrosive elements in the Republican Party that had given rise to the insurrection on January the 6th. That's not what happened, as we all know. They instead doubled and tripled down, and now the courting of the MAGA base, the coddling of that base, which includes, of course, kissing up not only to Trump, but to his proximate warriors on the Hill like Marjorie Taylor Greene, has led the Republican Party to the place where it is now.
Well, now they have to at least semi-govern. Kevin McCarthy, likely to be the new speaker. James says it's not a certainty. He's right, but knowing Kevin McCarthy, he'll do whatever he has to get there. He's not a man of strong convictions. Even with I think he's going to probably have no more than a 7 or 8 seat margin there. There'll be endless investigations and but McCarthy's dream to be the speaker could well turn into a nightmare with that caucus, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a parable that I recount in my book, Al, from the TV series The Wire, in which a mayor of Baltimore describes how the job of being mayor involves basically eating one bowl of human shit after another from this or that constituency group. And Patrick McHenry, one of the leading establishment Republicans in the House, sent over a clip of that to Kevin McCarthy by way of warning him, if this is the job you really want, this is what it's going to entail. And I do think that's the case. I mean, now with what's likely to be a narrow majority, if indeed he pulls out a majority at all, he is going to be having to cater to the MAGA constituency. Otherwise, they will make hell for him. Marjorie Taylor Greene has made that abundantly clear to me that she intends to have maximum leverage, and it will extend well beyond just getting plum committee assignments.
Well, you spent more time with Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, than any other mainstream reporter. So let's talk about her. She was the one-time QAnon spouting who actually Kevin McCarthy. I don't think it was your book. I think it was Lebo's book. He used to call her batshit crazy, but he's going to have to cater now. You spent a lot of time with her. I think you wrote she's not dumb, but she really is. She's is going to be crazy. She's going to do things that are going to drive McCarthy crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, for one thing, her viewpoints are pretty damn extreme. I mean, they're well outside of even Republican mainstream thought, though she has succeeded in messaging her way into the core of the GOP. What she has said to me is that, I mean, she, people ask me all the time, Al, is this person, first, is she dumb? And secondly, does she believe all this stuff? And thirdly, is she just a performance artist? And no, she's not dumb. Yes, she believes enough of this stuff, though she certainly hyperbolizes it for effect. And she intends to make good on all this. It's why she ran in 2019, because she was disappointed that Republicans hadn't enacted Trump's agenda. The problem, though, if the Republicans do take power, Al, is that simple measures like funding the war in Ukraine, for example, are now very, very much up in the air. Whether or not to raise the debt ceiling is also up in the air. The spectacle of successive continuing resolutions to keep the government open is up in the air. So those are the obvious things, in addition to the fact that you can expect to see retribution against Democrats who stripped Greene and Paul Gosar of their committee assignments, and you can expect as well to see impeachment initiatives brought to the House floor too. So that's what a Marjorie Taylor Greene majority is likely to look like.
Because she's going to have a bunch of followers or green mini Greens there. It's not just her. James Carville.
So, Robert, there are kind of competing views here, and I want you to weigh in on this. One view is that Trump, offered people out there a certain thing. He became a cult figure, and it's the sort of innovative Trumpism, and if we get rid of Trump, everything will go away. There's another view out there that I think was expressed by Kathy Barnett, the right-wing Senate candidate in Pennsylvania, who said, you got to understand, MAGA was there before Trump, MAGA will be here after Trump, and the only reason that we like Trump is he tells us what we already want to hear. And uses the specific example when he told people to get vaccinated in North Alabama, they booed him off the stage. So, absent, let's say Trump gets, he goes away. Does that cure the Republicans' problem, or they still have a MAGA Trumpism problem of the 100th degree?
Yeah, I think you've probably answered your own question, James. I mean, I think that the second scenario is likelier to be true. It's true that Trump exploited these populist grievances that predated him, and it's true that there is no one who has done that as effectively as him. But he's shown the Republican Party a new way, a different way than simply the very hard path of trying to persuade people who don't like you, to broaden your tent, in other words, and instead persuade people who like you to love you and demagogue against the rest, and then if all else fails, claim that you were cheated out of victory. So I certainly think that Trumpism will outlast Trump, and because and by the way, it's the thing that I'm most concerned with that will outlast Trump is that we now have tens of millions of Americans who believe the 2020 election was stolen, who believe the Democrats cheat to win whenever they do win, who believe that January the 6th was, take your pick, either a peaceful endeavor or an Antifa show of violence or a setup by the FBI, and who believe that COVID vaccines are killers. That is an element of Trumpism too, the spread of disinformation that is not going to go away just when Trump lumbers off stage.
So, Robert, I've been knowing you for a long time. I think you're a guy from suburban Houston, and I never viewed you as very ideological. I think you wrote books on Bush administration that were certainly not hit pieces or anything, and you seem to be, pretty sort of down the middle suburban Houston reporter, and then you said, wait a minute, what was your tipping point? When did you say, I need to investigate this? This shit ain't normal?
Well, I think it was when the Republican Party became unhinged from reality, James. I mean, I think that when it became clear that the party was not pursuing ideology, but instead was pursuing a kind of personality cult that would result in it being untethered to facts in the fealty towards that particular personality, Trump. That's when I began to realize, that you have to call out lies for what they are. You have to call out delusions for what they are, and you have to recognize it when one of the two parties that is instrumental to a functioning two-party system democracy becomes unhinged from reality. You have to call that stuff out, and so that's what this book does.
So, before I turn over to Al, what are like a couple of three things that people, when they buy your book called Weapons of Mass Delusion by Robert Draper, give us a couple of three things that they're going to find in there that are going to shock them, that shocked you when you found them out. He says, I mean, that's just some crazy shit, but man, this is over the top.
Yeah. James, I think, I came into this expecting a lot of the weapons side of the equation. That is to say, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, Paul Gosar, those people have been out there and their extreme views have been known. What I did not expect to encounter was the depth of delusion en masse, which is to say, to go into Republican areas and not just Trump rallies and not just Republican campaign events, but basically grassroots, run-of-the-mill Republican activities, and to see people who were utterly in the sway of disinformation, who operated in a kind of parallel reality in which people like me from the New York Times really are viewed as enemies of the American people, but more than that, who instead view as their reliable information sources things that, a decade ago didn't exist, like Gateway Pundit and Newsmax. And if you go to a Trump rally now, James, what you see on the media riser isn't CNN and NBC and ABC. What you see are right side broadcasting, Real America's Voice, One America Network, propaganda outlets for Trump that have become the reliable information sources for these people. And so they are in an ecosystem they simply can't get out of, where they are surrounded by untruth. The degree and the depth of that, the intensity of that, was something I just didn't expect to encounter, but everywhere I went, I did indeed confront.
I think, to go to James's question, Robert, I think almost every page something's going to pop out of people. Another fringe figure you write about in some depth is Arizona's Paul Gosar and his chief of staff. He's so loony that most of his family came out against him. But what gets me, he traffics with white nationalists, as you know. 4 years ago, the Republicans ostracized Steve King for trafficking with those kind of hate groups. But not today. They don't do anything to Gosar Day because, Robert, that's part of their base now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Al, I included Paul Gosar in my book for 2 or 3 reasons. I mean, one was that he was kind of the Mrs. O'Leary's cow that started the whole Stop the Steal thing in Arizona and objected to certifying Arizona on January the 6th. Also, he's a Tea Party congressman. He came in on the 2010 wave. And so I was interested in seeing, as I have been since I wrote about that class in 2012, how they have sort of been, how they've seeped into the bloodstream. And Gosar is interesting, not because he's terribly influential as a standalone figure, but because how the Republican Party, just as you described it, Al, has come to just accept him and not try to punish him in any way, because they're afraid of not so much him, but the MAGA movement that he represents. So you mentioned that he attended this white nationalist rally headed by Nicholas Fuentes, and McCarthy didn't so much as say anything to him about it. When he was going to do a fundraiser with Fuentes and ultimately kicked the plug out on it, McCarthy just asked him, "Hey, is it true you're going to do a fundraiser?" And Gosar said no, and he gave him a high five, and that was it. And so this, what the Republican leadership has come to understand is that if you try to punish these guys, you turn them into folk heroes in the far-right movement. And so McCarthy's response then has not only been not even to try, but to defend them. And indeed, when Gosar was stripped from his committee assignments by the Democrats, McCarthy then went to Gosar and not only promised him that in a Republican majority he'd get his committee assignments back, but that he would get, quote, better assignments. So far from being, disciplined for his misconduct, he's being rewarded for it.
This crazy caucus, let's call it that, they lost one of their members apparently on Tuesday. It looks like Lauren Boebert lost, which is was a surprise, but a well-earned defeat. But how big is this Green Gosar crazy caucus in the House right now, do you think?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. First, on Lauren Boebert, the race isn't over yet, but this is a case of where Boebert, her Colorado's 3rd congressional district is red, but not red in the way that, say, Marjorie Taylor Greene's Northwest Georgia district is, or Matt Gaetz's Florida district is. Durango is there, Aspen is there, but Boebert has kind of drunk the Kool-Aid of the MAGA movement and has become a national figure and has basically forgotten that the folks at home don't entirely cotton to all of this nonsense. Not all of them do in any event. So to directly answer your question, when you look at what will be possibly the Republican House majority, it's going to be a minority that are full-on MAGA types, but that's not the point. And the point isn't even that they're the loudest, most obnoxious voices in the room. It's that they represent a MAGA movement that establishment Republicans remain terrified of, to the point where, and this is documented in my book, they've said over and over, look, I'm not going to fight Marjorie Taylor Greene. If I do that, she's going to come after me. I'm going to get primaried to my right. I'm going to lose, and the person who comes to Washington is going to be another Marjorie Taylor Greene. That serves no one in the party, and therefore I'm just going to kind of hold my tongue. The problem then becomes how do you figure that a Marjorie Taylor Greene gets flushed out of the GOP system? They're assuming that someone like her will go away on her own, and there's no evidence to support that assumption.
The mainstream Republicans dream that. It's not going to happen. I was absorbed by so much in your book with as Kevin McCarthy called them one time, the batshit crazies. But I think the one that just drove me, it really just made me furious, was when 2 of those Capitol Hill police officers who were injured while trying to keep the Trump mob away on January 6th, and the mother of a Capitol Hill police officer who was killed came to talk to members. And some Republicans like Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney were treated them with great respect and gave them time. But then there were others. Ron Johnson started talking about Trump. Ted Cruz stiffed them. Lindsey Graham appeared disinterested. These were the brave men who risked their lives for these politicians. And these people were so, I guess, afraid of that MAGA mob that they treated them with disrespect. That's really disgusting. Robert.
Yeah. Like in the the time they had with Senator Ron Johnson, they did say that he was very sort of courtly to them, but he also said, frankly, the MAGA types, they're very, very peaceful. He was casting doubt on Trump and his movement having any role in the riot that took place, where, after all, I would say these Capitol Police would have a pretty good idea because they're the ones who confronted them at very close range. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy had them come to meet with him too, but it was clear that he was just checking boxes. He asked the cops if they like to hunt and that sort of thing. So it is definitely and as my book mentions, Al, I mean, on January the 6th, when Trump and Kevin McCarthy had their phone conversation, and Trump said to McCarthy, well, it seems like these people, the rioters, are more concerned about the results of the election and any election fraud than you are. And McCarthy's response was concern. They're effing trying to kill me. So this was McCarthy, on the one hand, recognizing the gravity of the circumstances on January the 6th. Then months later, basically trying to get by with a minimum to humor a bunch of Capitol policemen, usher them out the door, and then vote against the January 6th committee.
I'm going to turn it over to James. But next time there's an assault on the Capitol, let's send Ron Johnson and Kevin McCarthy out to the front lines. Go ahead, James.
All right, so this is a real possibility. Let's say there's 3/4 vote Republican majority. All right, now I am correct on this. I think that the entire House gets to vote on the Speaker, and that it is not a requirement to be Speaker of the House that you're a member of the House. So Hakeem Jeffers, the new Democratic leader, goes to a group of Republicans and say, hey, I got 212 votes. You get me 5, and we can run the House. And, are there 5 people that say, I just can't do this with Paul Gosar, Marjorie Taylor Greene, this nutty stuff? Why don't we make Liz Cheney Speaker? Is that me just being crazy or something, or they're gonna have a real problem electing a speaker with a 3 or 4 vote majority?
Well, I mean, that scenario has been floated all the way around, and it's a scenario that Kevin McCarthy's well aware of too, James. In fact, it's one of the things that he's been saying to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who don't have a speaker candidate of their own and realize McCarthy has outflanked them, but still want to get as much in the way of concessions as they can out of McCarthy. McCarthy's counter to that is, well, look, you can try to squeeze every drop of blood out of this rock that you want in terms of concessions. But the reality, Marjorie, is that, if we're not careful, a Democrat will be the speaker. And is that really your goal here? So the scenario that you're describing is one that for one thing, I think the short answer is no. I don't envision there being even 5 Republicans who would go along with the scheme that you described that Hakeem Jeffries might float to them. Those would be 5 Republicans who are just asking to be primaried, and to get the Liz Cheney treatment. And I should say that is the object lesson among House Republicans now who would dare to speak up against Donald Trump and against the MAGA movement. They all point to Liz Cheney not as a profile in courage, but as the cautionary tale for what happens. You lose your job. That's their view of it. So I don't see a scenario where that kind of support would eventuate.
Well, Nancy Pelosi was masterful in her dealing with a very slim Democratic majority. This guy's not going to do it. I think that this thing falls apart at some juncture. But if it stays, if it stays in that really, really marginal way.
And the other thing too, James, is that since you've mentioned Pelosi, it's worth recognizing not only what Pelosi's done with a slender majority, not only what she did while she was in the minority, but also further to what we were saying about Gosar, that we saw how she has maintained discipline within the Democratic caucus in a way that one cannot envision Kevin McCarthy doing. I mean, it's she's she made clear to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez by denying her a seat on energy and commerce that she, Pelosi, was not going to be run roughshod over by the progressives, in the Democratic caucus. And again, the Pelosi, for whatever else anybody, including her foremost detractors, will say about her, really, keeps that caucus together, is always in a position to remind people of the power that she has. And I just do not see that happening under a McCarthy-run Republican majority.
Right. Well, I can't thank you enough, but, you've been a dear friend for a long time. You've been very successful in your career. I think this is, the most successful thing that you've ever done, or maybe anybody has ever done, on this really important topic. So I'm proud that you're on the show today after the election, proud to call you a friend, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, James.
And let me just add two things. Number one, picking up on that, Robert, I've been in this town, as you know, for a long time. Nancy Pelosi is without doubt the best speaker, and since I've been here, and I think maybe the best speaker in the history of the House. That's how good she's been. And secondly, I want to tell all of you out there, the Republicans I'm convinced, are going to take over the House. There's still some races out. And you must read Weapons of Mass Delusion. If you want to understand this crowd, Robert Draper has done the best job of telling you what they're all about. It's not, you may stay awake at night after you read it, but it's really a terrific book. So thank you, Robert.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
The holidays are coming up, and it's the perfect time to dive into things you've wanted to explore all year. Nothing is better for that than Blinkist. Blinkist helps you discover and understand key insights and powerful ideas from books and podcasts in record time with blinks and shortcasts. Imagine discovering new perspectives, having exciting conversations, and finding those aha moments you've been looking for. Blinkist offers the best selection of nonfiction books and podcasts condensed down to 15 minutes for immediate inspiration and mastery. They offer over 5,500 titles in 27 categories in their unique, entertaining, and engaging audio format. It's perfect no matter where you are or what you're doing, and whether it's for education or pleasure. Now, not only is Blinkist easy and enjoyable to use, you can even listen and read at the same time by downloading titles for offline access. And while celebrating their 10-year anniversary, Blinkist launched a totally new function that will be your favorite feature ever. Think of all those great ideas you naturally want to share and discuss with others. Instead of just keeping them to yourself, Blinkist Connect does just that. Blinkist Connect allows all premium users to share your account with another person of your choice. So you effectively get 2 premium accounts for the price of one at zero cost. That way you can easily share blinks and shortcasts with each other with just one click. James and I, we're going to start sharing a lot of the best ones. Recently, we loved the insights of Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens and the powerful arguments in John Meacham's The Soul of America, a fight we've never stopped waging. But you can learn more about any topic you can think of with Blinkist, James.
Absolutely. And, my favorite thing is, I was wondering how I was so smart, and then I read this article that it's harder to get a job at Blinkist than it is to get into Harvard. And so that operation is in Berlin, which is one of my favorite cities in the world. Boy, if any of you listeners, whatever idea you have what Berlin is, it's wrong. Let me tell you, that is a diverse, hip, moving, exciting place. And I'm going to go back and I want to go see the Blinkist headquarters.
And I want to visit their headquarters. So right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/warroom to start your 7-day free trial and get 25% off of a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. Blinkist.com/warroom to get 25% off and a 7-day free trial. Again, Blinkist.com/warroom. And now for a limited time, you can even use Blinkist Connect to share your premium account so you get 2 premium subscriptions for the price of one. You also can look for the link in our show notes. a lot of listener questions, James. Some of them came in before the election, so I'm going to have to skip them. But we have some that certainly are politics related. James, the first question is from Jerry in Texas, and I think this is Texas-centric. Can you talk in greater detail about the reset you think Democrats need?
Well, I think the reset that they need more consistent and repetitive messaging, but that's going to be hard to do. The Republicans controlling the House, and everything that's going to happen in 2024 is going to be determined by one thing, and that is our presidential candidate. So I didn't think our messaging was particularly effective in 2022, but Trump's was such a domineering factor. It actually, to use a cliche, he trumped everything. But I think that whatever message reset that we have is going to be largely determined by our nominating process for our presidential candidate and what happens in a general election.
Yeah, I concur. Joe in Fresno, California says Republican-funded polls touting GOP gains were published last week to bring down the Democratic averages and discourage Democratic voters. What's your take? Well, first of all, I don't think it discouraged Democratic voters, but it did happen. Outfits like Trafalgar and Insider published polls that really were out of sync, and it created the impression there were a lot of races that were either Democrats were losing, which they weren't, or it was going to be really close, which it wasn't. So it just is a lesson. I think the polls actually had a pretty good night, but it's a lesson to look. All polls are not equal.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, no one ever wants to say the polls were, the mainstream polls are more, they were all pretty much on the mark. I mean, they had we didn't pay enough attention to the contra-indicators, which were massive number of people voting early, which, if you think about it, let's do a little political consultant 101. Older white people tend to vote at very high rates in all elections, right? So if you have a real jacked up turnout, there's only so much more blood left in the older white, post-55 white turnip, if you will. But what it tells me, and I'm waiting for Catalyst and Ron Brownstein and Wasserman and all of our friends to digest what really happened here. But I think we had a jacked up turnout among young people and probably some jacked up among females. But somebody came out. But the polling, in the Senate polling, I mean, we talked all the time, they were all 48-48. Well, it all ended up some version of 48-48.
Yeah, those 4 or 5
New Hampshire
for
was
sure.
a low, but
and Colorado was too. Look, Jeff in Marin County, California says, I want to get involved in the person-to-person relationship building and outreach that's not being done. I guess, it certainly is being done if you're a Democrat in Marin County. But anyway, he says, I'm sure in this audience, I'm not alone. Where do we start? Who do we talk to? What do we do? Do I just send my resume to someone seeking office? Do we reach out to a PAC?
That is a really good question. And I've been asked that a lot. And what I tell people you should do, you should pick a race in, an important race. And it can be a U.S. Senate or governor, it can be a state Supreme Court race. It can be anything. And I'm assuming that you don't want to travel and move somewhere different for 3 months. But you can get involved with the campaign. You can ask to do research. You can donate money to it. You can get call lists. You say, give me some list of some, Democratic-based voters that I can get in touch with and get them to get out and vote. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do, but the best thing to do is to find a really important, relevant race and try to get in touch with somebody there. It doesn't necessarily have to be the campaign manager, but somebody of some influence in the campaign and say, look, put me to work. I'm sitting in Marin County and I'm desperate. I love my country and I want to devote, 3.5 hours a day to this. And that's how you can do it. And they'll give you assignments. You can do all kinds of different things.
Brian, outside of Wilmington, North Carolina, that's a terrific city. That really is. I love Wilmington. Says, I'm sure he's talking about Democrats. Our party is in shambles with no leadership and it's not up to Joe. He has enough to do, and he's too old. Who will step up? Who are the young leaders to look to? Brian, your question was much more on the mark 2 days ago. It was a good night Tuesday. I have great. I wrote this, so I don't mind saying it. I don't think Biden should run again. I think he should actually go and retire in 25 on his laurels. He had a terrific first 2 years. If they keep the Senate and get a whole bunch of appointments through, do important foreign policy, but there are a lot of younger people out there. Number of them won last night, like Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. So keep your eye on them. Don't worry yet about that.
I completely concur. And I can tell you, I won't go through the litany of names, but I can think of 10 people that are going to, be terrific messengers for the Democratic Party. I think that we have a wealth of bench talent, and we've got to get them off the bench and into the game.
Yeah, I concur totally. Gerald in Nashville, Tennessee says, this is a good one, James. Are professional political consultants really important? Aren't they just giving someone's opinion on how someone else should run their campaign? What makes a good one?
Well, I mean, okay, I appreciate the question because there's all kinds of different political consultants. I mean, there's some people that do direct voter contact, they do TV, they do polling, they do all kinds of different things. It's like anything else. I think if you have a good one that the candidate has confidence in, it can play a significant role in setting the parameters of the campaign. But it's a very diffuse business. There's all kinds of different people in it. But every candidate is going to have somebody or a group of people that they're going to rely on for judgment, for logistics, to just get things out, do things, schedule. I mean, it's a pretty large undertaking. And to do it better, it helps a lot more than to not do it better. I guarantee you, this thing in Arizona is very upsetting, and some people think that Kerry Lake is going to eke out a win. If Katie Hobbs they were telling me stories like the Saturday before the election, she was in Tucson with the University of Arizona with 14 people. I mean, she loses that thing by 500 votes. Yeah, I don't know what a campaign was, who a campaign manager was. I don't know much about it, but it was a colossally unimpressive thing from a distance.
One of the worst interviews I saw all season. Daniel in San Juan Capistrano, California, says, can someone please explain to me how voting Republican will solve inflation in this country and around the rest of the world for that matter? Daniel, no. No one can explain to you because it won't. As a matter of fact, I think it's possible that if the Republicans control the Senate, which I think is very unlikely now, but if they control the Senate and the House, they would make it worse. I mean, they want to repeal the cap on insulin prices. They want to repeal the provision that allows Medicare to negotiate with the drug companies. It would lower drug prices. And they want to give more to an already incredibly rich oil industry. So no, they'll talk about cutting spending, but they also want to cut taxes. And I would just remind them always when they say this is all due to Biden's policy, they ought to answer why inflation is even worse in Germany and in Great Britain.
Well, so the proposal we do know from the mouth of Kevin McCarthy and the mouth of Rick Scott, and traditionally at the heart of the Republican thing is they say they are going to shut the government down. And I think of what that's going to do for you in order to force cuts to Social Security and Medicare. So you think that a elderly person on a fixed income that has Social Security, it needs a COLA or they need a cut? You think the children of that person. The same thing with Medicare. We should just be a one-trick pony. It would devastate tens of millions of people and maybe hundreds of millions of families in the United States if you did something like that.
Next, Deborah in Fairplay, Maryland. I know a lot about Maryland. I don't know Fairplay. She says, I plan to engage with the Washington County Democratic Committee. That must be, one of the red counties in the state. Because I was appalled at how few local races even had a Democratic candidate running. How do we get the state Democratic apparatus working more aggressively with every Democratic county in every state to develop credible Democratic candidates? P.S. How am I going to get by without seeing Judy on the PBS NewsHour? I will answer that one first, then turn it over to you, James. Judy is going to continue on the PBS NewsHour for quite a while, so please stay tuned. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, well, you got a new energetic governor there, and hopefully, and let's see, but keep your eye on, because sometimes when you have governors, they get very involved in the state party. And obviously, the governor picks the state party chair, and you should monitor that very closely and then let your voice be heard. And there's probably some, shallow organization there in Washington County, and get some of your friends and go to work and try to activate it and get it going. Now, I'm a big believer there's a lot that people can do, right in their own community and their own neighborhoods to bring about a difference here. And sometimes you don't get the satisfaction if you're in a red county of winning, but boy, you do get a lot of satisfaction of doing better. And that, and you can do that with with some investment of a little money and time in these local committees.
Yep, and you're right about Wes Moore. I actually met Wes Moore 21 years ago at his college commencement. He was impressive then. He's even more impressive now. And I would think that he would really want to energize that Democratic Party in Maryland. Listen, those questions are terrific. Keep them coming. There will be lots to talk about post the analysis of this last election and what's ahead. So please send them in and tell us where you're from. Hey, winter is here, and for us that means struggling to find the right temperature when we sleep. But we've recently found a way to stay at the perfect temperature all night long using a silver-infused bed sheets by Miracle Brand that were inspired by NASA. Using silver-infused fabrics, Miracle Brand makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can always sleep in comfort. Since we started using Miracle Brand's self-cooling bed sheets, you stay comfortable every night. All night, thanks to Miracle Brand's thermoregulating sheets, unique to self-cooling properties. Even better, they're self-cleaning, thanks to their infusion of natural silver that prevents 99.9% of bacterial growth. They stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. So forget those gross odors. Their design makes them much better for your skin, less bacteria to clog your pores. That means fewer breakouts and other skin problems. Miracle sheets are also luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands. Their sheets use a premium 500 thread count sateen weave that's made with a USA-grown Supima cotton, one of the highest quality cottons in the world. That makes Miracle sheets the perfect gift for your spouse, friends, or family. Who doesn't want better sleep and luxurious feeling bed sheets? And since these come with 3 free towels, you get 2 gifts in one, just in time for the holidays. Sleep cleaner, be more comfortable in luxury with Miracle Brand sheets, and they're perfect, James, for the deep sleep that we both need.
The most determinative factor in the way that I feel, and I think this is true for most all the people who listen to the show, is how much sleep you get tonight. And the most determinative factor, how good a night's sleep you get, is the temperature. This product is golden. It is absolutely golden, because what happens at 8 hours at night determines the 16 hours that you're awake more than anything else that I can think of.
Wow. So go to trymiracle.com/war room to try it today, or gift it to someone special this holiday season. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Save over 40% and be sure to use our promo code War Room at checkout to save even more and get 3 free towels. And Miracle's so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not 100% satisfied, you get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Brand. Go to trymiracle.com/war room and use the code War Room to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40%. Again, that's miracle.com/war room to treat yourself, a friend, or a loved one this holiday season. You also can find the link in our show notes. Thank you, Miracle Brand, for sponsoring this episode. Hey, now for the outrage, James, there's so many, it's hard to pick. And I want to go back to one I couldn't get to last week, and that's Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. He was supposedly, remember, the respectable Trump. That's an oxymoron. But he showed his true colors by making a wisecrack after Speaker Pelosi's husband, Paul, was brutally beaten and was in surgery. Remember that, you Youngkin fans. A new one, however. Donald Trump Jr., a chip off the old vile block, charged that Pennsylvania Senate candidate John Fetterman, recovering from a stroke, didn't have a working brain. A lie, of course. The Trumps delight in mocking people with disabilities. Remember, Trump Sr. imitated and made fun of a New York Times reporter with physical disabilities. Donnie Jr. said a senator had to have a working cognitive function. Donnie shouldn't run for the Senate.
Well, I guess my outrage, and I can't think of his name, but that quack MD that's on Fox, who said that Fetterman wouldn't survive his term. There's supposedly this thing, and you're not supposed to offer an opinion unless you examine a patient or anything else. I don't think this man has ever seen Fetterman's medical records or anything else. But then he was the same guy that told us not to worry about COVID. So in the Hall of Fame of medical idiocy, he stands alone.
You know, I'll tell you something. If you really wanted to know what a lowlife Dr. Oz is, it was the way he treated us. As a doctor, he could have shown empathy for John Fetterman, and you know what? It would have helped him politically. Instead, he became the lowlife that he has been ever since he started selling quack cures on television. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show @Politicon. Following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the links to our sponsors, Henson Shaving, Blinkist, and Miracle Brand in the show notes. We deeply thank you for supporting them. When you do, you help make this podcast happen. To keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. Please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.